What's up, Vibers? I woke up Thursday morning in a cold sweat. Thought I was maybe still dreaming because I saw an announcement on the SUPERVIVE Discord saying that SUPERVIVE is moving to trios. They are essentially going to be merging their duos queue and squads queue into a single queue that is now trios, which currently looks like 12 squads of 3 for 36 players on the map. And I know initially this sounds like a terrifying change, especially if you've been around SUPERVIVE for a while. Like, I've been playtesting a long time, guys. I had literally no idea this was coming. This caught me completely off guard. And my initial reaction maybe was not that great. I'm not going to lie. But as I started to understand why they're doing it and how it could potentially make the game better, it started to make a lot more sense. And then on Friday, along with anyone else who signed up, I was able to play test it for 2 hours. And then I was fortunate enough to get to observe and shoutcast the trio scrims hosted by Dylan. Shout out Dylan FPS for putting together the very first SUPERVIVE scrims trios in history. And so I ended up actually getting quite a bit of exposure to this change. I got to play it for myself for 2 hours. Then I got to watch legend rank kind of players at the highest level play this change out. Still very new to them as well, right? But kind of seeing how that looked at the highest level of competitive play. I'm going to post the full VOD of those scrims tomorrow so you can get, kind of a detailed look if you're more interested. But in this video, my goal is to basically update you on what is changing and why. And what I really want to do is like try to paint a clear picture for you on not just why they say this is happening, but also why I truly think this is happening and kind of my initial thoughts after getting a couple hours to play and a couple hours to watch. So I'm going to read through this Discord post in a minute to kind of give you the details of all this. But in general, basically, the reasoning for going to trios, for moving to trios, is pretty much in line with the changes we've been seeing over the last few months, primarily framed as a way to make combat more readable. And basically, this is not just for new players. This is also for very, high-level competitive experience players, because the goal is essentially to lower the meter of chaos just a couple notches so that the player has more opportunity to read the battlefield, actually see what other hunters are doing on other teams, track cooldowns, track powers, and actually make like strategic, calculated tactical outplay versus sort of just getting a bit lucky with the RNG of the chaos. Because right now in squads, I'll tell you what, it's an absolute blast to watch, and it is really fun to play, but it is like an nth level of chaos. And especially if you're not used to it, there is so much happening so quickly in four-man squads in SUPERVIVE that you really have to kind of be deep into the game to really even play it at an average level. And if you look at sort of the mission statement of Theorycraft and what they were trying to develop with this game, they are trying to make a 10,000 hour game. That has been the goal that Joe Tung has set out with since the very beginning of like founding Theorycraft, is making 10,000 hour games, and SUPERVIVE is basically the first project on that docket. So what that means to make a 10,000 hour game, that shit has to be deep, bro. You got to have very deep, compelling combat mechanics. You have to have, a lot of layers of complexity to give it the depth you want to keep people engaged for 10,000 hours. A simple game is not going to keep people engaged for 10,000 hours. Like a game like League of Legends being a very good example. It's extremely complex. If you've never played a MOBA, you have absolutely zero clue what's going on, but it's that level of depth and complexity that keeps, millions of players engaged over decades, right? And so the way it looks to me so far is that this change is basically a change for everyone, where it's not only a change that's going to help new players, because there's going to be sort of less chaos to grapple with. There's going to be one less person on each team bursting you down when you get crowd controlled, right? There's like basically one less person to fight against in every scenario, but you also have one less person on your team. So essentially like lowering the volume of the chaos slightly. And in turn, what that should do is make the whole game more readable, make combat more compelling by giving you the ability to actually track what's happening on a moment-to-moment basis and react to engages, to abilities, to things your enemies are doing, because you can actually see them happening, because there's not, an nth level of craziness happening on your screen. Now, this announcement was made on Thursday morning of this week, so March 13th, just a couple days ago. And I was going to make a video right then, but I saw that the playtest, the very first playtest, was happening just the day after. So on Friday, the 14th, we got a 2-hour playtest window in EU and a 2-hour playtest window slightly later in North America servers. And so I wanted to try it out and see how it felt to give you guys some real context here. And then, sort of happenstance after that, Dylan, who runs the daily scrims, actually converted them into Trios scrims because Trios is available in the custom game options right now in the actual game if you have customs access. So we actually ran the very first Trios scrims that I think SUPERVIVE has ever had, maybe. And it was super cool, but that's sort of the gameplay you see. And I know it sounds really stupid to say this, but literally the best way I can describe Trios is it feels right in between squads and duos. Like if you've played squads and if you've played duos, the kind of pacing of those two modes, Trios feels literally right in the middle of that, and you're like, duh, Zick. Like, that makes total sense. But that's literally the best way I can describe how it feels, because if you've played duos, it has this sort of finality to it where you can get wiped really fast. If you make one mistake, it's much more punishable because you only have one other player there to back you up and help you out and get you back if you mess up. Whereas in squads, you have 3 other players that can do that, right? So you have, sort of literally triple the chances of recovering in a squads game than you do in a duos game. So everything that happens in duos is like a bit more tactical, and it is more readable. Like if you've played duos, if you're in a 2v2 against another duo squad, you can sort of track the abilities, cooldowns, powers of what those two are doing way more kind of reliably than you can in a squads mode where you're in a 4v4 and maybe there's another 4 on your flank looking, and there's all of a sudden, 8 players you're having to track abilities, cooldowns, and react to them doing stuff all at the same time. But in the squads mode, that's sort of the chaos is what makes it so good. That sort of level of madness that's happening, like especially to watch. Like I absolutely adore watching squad SUPERVIVE just because of the chaos. Specifically, the chaos makes it so exciting, makes the storyline so interesting as the games play out. However, there are certainly situations, and I know from knowing a lot of the high-level competitors personally, that there is a lot of RNG in squads and just built into SUPERVIVE in general on purpose to create this chaos. And sometimes that RNG can mess with sort of the competitive integrity, where teams and players will feel like they won or lost based on RNG of the storm shift, RNG of, what powers show up here, RNG of getting third party, all these different things that can kind of come out of nowhere in the squads BR. There's basically like less of that madness in duos, and it's duos is more of like the tactical sort of mechanic finality of the whole thing, right? And so what Trios feels like is literally like, I don't want to say perfect, but it feels like a pretty good middle ground of these two modes. And something interesting that I felt is like at the end of the 2 hours of playing, I was like, I thought that was going to feel more drastic. Like I thought it was going to feel way different from squads. But to be honest, like it just feels a little more tame, like a little more kind of relaxed isn't the right word, like a little more like dialed in, like a little more tactical, where it's a bit more final. Like you can't mess up as much. Like if you mess up, especially once Resurgence is gone, it's like much more punishing having 3 players to try to get it all back versus 4 players. But what that does is kind of make the combat and the whole setting a little more competitive, right? Where if you're lowering the RNG element, the sort of skill expression of the individual players has a little bit more room to shine when you kind of lessen the chaos knob a bit, right? And so and then that same exact thing applies to new players too, right? Where a new player has to grapple with significantly less chaos in a trio setting than they would in a squad setting. And I think for newer players, for the same reason they even made duos in the first place. By the way, duos was essentially an afterthought. They added it because it tested better for new player engagement. And the whole game, the whole time, has been designed around squads, guys, 4 players. So if you're like a duo main player and you haven't really given squads like the full look, like squads is significantly better than duos. I'm just going to say it. I've played them both a decent amount. I'm not a huge fan of duos. Squads is where it's at. Squads is what SUPERVIVE was literally designed around. However, perhaps the result of all these mechanics sort of stacking over the, few years of development that they've been making this thing, perhaps it's now a bit too much chaos in squads. And so I think Trios is essentially the middle ground they've arrived at, where maybe it's the sort of perfect amount of chaos, right? For everyone, new player and experienced player alike, to really thrive and get kind of the most juice, the most value, the most like dopamine out of Supervive. And there's going to be a ton of sort of, after effects that happen because of this. There's going to be builds are going to change, the meta is going to completely shift, team comps are going to be completely different, like everything is going to be sort of upheaved from what we know now in 4-man squads. But that's pretty exciting. Like, that's a cool thing. Like, this game is so new, there's so much kind of meta shifting that's happening constantly that, I think giving everyone that's kind of interested now like a fresh start to all kind of learn the meta together, right? I think is going to be a really cool thing. But another really cool thing about this is that the duos and squads queues are now going to be combined. So we're actually going to have a significantly bigger player base that's in the same queue versus that player base being split into 2 separate queues, right? Duos and squads. Now everyone is going to be in the trios queue. And what that also is going to enable them to do is essentially enable you to play ranked and unranked in separate lobbies. So right now, if you queue unranked Supervive, you will get, your elo is the same. You're basically getting matched based on your elo. And so if you queue unranked, you're getting in the same lobbies you would get into if you're playing ranked. And your elo is still getting tracked and changing. You're just not getting ranked points for it. So it's like, if I want to just have a chill game where I'm practicing a ghost build and I'm just like warming up for the day and I'm just wanting to like hang out and test some stuff, like that's an unranked game. I'm not trying to get super sweaty and like climb a bunch of RP and win a bunch of games. I'm just trying to have some fun, play some Supervive. That should be unranked, and that should be a separate queue than all the sweaties murdering each other for RP, because it's a totally different mindset. You play a totally different way. And right now, I queue unranked and I get put on a team with 3 ranked players. They're fundamentally wanting to play the game different than me from the start. The reasons we queued are literally different, because I queued unranked, they queued ranked, right? And so we're probably not going to have a great team synergy if I'm YOLO trying out a new build on Ghost, just having fun, and they're really trying hard to win, right? And that's going to create a bad experience for everyone involved. It's going to create a bad experience for me, and it's going to create a bad experience for the 3 players on my team that think I'm inting and I'm trolling because I am just wanting to have some fun and try something. So combining the queues into a single trios queue is going to give them the ability to let you queue unranked and ranked and have those be completely separate lobbies. So now if you do queue unranked, you will get into a game with 40 other players that are also unranked, that are also just there to have fun, that are maybe testing stuff out, that are maybe learning, just there to have a good time with friends, etc., right? And conversely, if you queue into ranked, you're going to get the same experience where everyone in that lobby, all 40 players, are there to compete. They're there with, their ranked points on the line. Everyone's anteing in and everyone's playing hard, to rank up. And that's the kind of goal of that lobby. Whereas the goal of the unranked lobby is to have fun, learn, try stuff, play Supervive, So I really do think the combining of the queues in addition to separating ranked and unranked is going to be a really positive change for the game. And if you kind of forget about everything else and just think about kind of what that can do for the current player base and what it might do as we start to, gain players as they move toward 1.0 and look for that big, very first marketing push. And like I mentioned, there's going to be so much kind of nuance here that we end up, kind of talking through some of it, figuring some of it out in that shoutcast. So I will post the VOD for that tomorrow. But before we wrap up here, I just want to like walk you guys through the actual verbiage of like what they say, show you guys the actual post, and kind of give you guys a timeline of how you can get involved, give your feedback, and help out. So the first thing I want to show you here is just how to get notified of these playtests if you're interested, because there is going to be another Trios playtest next week. So these were the windows that ran this week, the day after they announced it. They have said there's going to be another day where they're doing 2 more windows like this, 1 2-hour for EU, 1 2-hour for NA. But we don't know what day or when next week. So if you want to find out when that's happening and you want to sign up and participate, all you got to do is join the SUPERVIVE Discord, go to channels and roles, scroll down, check on playtester, and this is going to give you this playtest interested role. And then what you will be able to do is in announcements, basically you're going to see all the big stuff that's hitting for live. But the channel right under that is where you'll see stuff that's getting basically tested internally and more kind of niche type changes and adjustments. And this is basically where they'll post smaller playtests that are happening for like cutting edge changes that may or may not make the live build. So you can see the playtest interested ping right here if you want to get the notification of when it goes up. And this is the post for the Trios playtest that just happened. So I'm going to read this full thing to you guys just to give you like full clarity on kind of what got said and why it's all happening. But the most important takeaway here is that it is happening, homies. It is going through whether you want it or not. It looks like the plan is to ship the Trios Q merge on April 2nd. And so that's going to be right at the beginning of April next month in a couple weeks. And we expect that to be the same exact day they ship the new Hunter with the new kind of content update that they've been doing basically on a monthly cadence. We saw Bebo January, we saw Krista February, we saw Saros March, and we're expecting, you know, the new Hunter beginning of April should be right around the same date, and it probably is going to happen right when the Trios Q get merged together. But basically, they want to make sure all the tuning and feedback is right before they do. So the reason for these tests aren't to decide if they're going to do it or not. That's basically decided. They're just trying to dial it in kind of as good as they can get it before they ship it live. And so feedback on this stuff is like more important than ever. So if you are interested in trying this out early and want to give your feedback to Theorycraft on what feels good, what feels bad, you know, what's cool, what's not about it, highly recommend grabbing this role in the Discord and keeping an eye out next week for this ping that's going to be going out for the second round of playtest before this does eventually go live. All right, let's take a look at this baby. So it says TLDR, no TLDR. Read the entire context, please. And that's kind of why I made a video, is there's even a lot more to say than what's just right here in text. But it's like, it's a pretty deep kind of subject. So also we want to make sure we get this right. So we're running multiple playtests to ensure we're covering our bases, what we just talked about. Note, we'll share a fireside chat the week we plan to ship Trios April 2nd, going deeper into our long-term goals for SUPERVIVE. For now, we're just going to be talking about the Trios for this playtest. Okay, so getting into it, I'll lead with the why. One of SUPERVIVE's biggest challenges is currently the speed at which teams can focus fire their targets, which in turn makes organized squads absolutely dominant in most lobbies. This then makes solo players really struggle to stick with SUPERVIVE, especially because it's so hard to carry in a 1v4 or even a 2v4 scenario. We've heard this feedback consistently over the months and have tried a lot of things, but have yet to find anything really effective. So, after a lot of iteration and internal experiments, we've come to the decision that the game would be improved if we combined squads and duos into trios. So we're going to do it. It's happening, baby. Now, this isn't a decision we make lightly, but we think the gains are just too important for the game. Combat clarity, which seems like kind of the biggest winning factor here to me, goes way up when you take out 25% of the participants. Positioning matters much more when you have only 3 scouts, and your ability to solo outplay an opposing team feels more achievable when it's 25% easier. Is this math right? I don't know. But it's a fair, you know, kind of point, and the numbers, the percentages kind of give it some context where here's just a very, you know, easy example to kind of internalize. It is easier to win a 1v3 than it is a 1v4, just outright, right? 25% easier, but let's be real, probably a little higher percentage than that even, because oftentimes that very last one is the one that kind of, you know, spoils the crazy 4-man outplay, right? Because they catch you in the CC, they get a little bit of damage out with it while their teammates are on you, you know, these little things that just kind of add up and result in it being much, much harder. Think about this, from every single enemy team on the map, there's going to be 25% less damage coming at you. There's going to be 25% less abilities getting thrown at you. There's going to be 25% less crowd control to dodge. It's literally going to be a quarter of the stuff that was coming at you from a squad of 4 gone, because there's only be 3 squads there. However, there's going to be a couple more squads on the map. So very likely it's going to start, instead of, 40 players, 10 squads of 4, it's very likely going to start with 36 players, 12 squads of 3, right? So not only are you going to have less chaos coming at you from each team, you're actually going to have 4 less total players on the map, basically, you know, 1 team down essentially in number of players from where we started. And all that might change too, but essentially it's less chaos. It's less things you have to read, things you have to grapple with moment to moment to be an effective SUPERVIVE player. And another interesting consideration with the math is like we were talking about kind of the finality of things and how it's like a little closer to duos in the consequences of your actions. If you have 4 players on your squad and you're down a member, you're missing 25% of your power right there, right? If you're a squad of 3 and you're missing a member, you're missing 33% of your power right there. So basically, you know, every member of each team counts as kind of more to the total value of that team. And that's going to do all kinds of things, like make people more likely to move and play together, less likely to split off and scout, split off to farm, you know, all these little things that are easy to get away with in squads because you have 4 players and it's fairly reliable for at least one of them to be able to get out in a random direction and live and get everyone back. There's going to be more consequence, more kind of compelling reasons to strategize and stick together rather than kind of the YOLO solo squads mentality that's out there right now, right? Okay, getting back to this, it says, additionally, merging squads and duos into trios lets us do a lot of things behind the scenes to upgrade the queue's experience, which includes splitting ranked and unranked lobbies for more competitive ranked matches and less sweats in your unranked matches. So this is like the earlier thing we were talking about where kind of the side benefit of making this trios change is combining the queues together and being able to actually queue unranked into other unranked players and queue ranked into ranked players. And this is also going to speed up queue times across the board by combining the duos and squads players together. And then it says for you duo only folks, the ability to queue with no fill so you can stay duo even in a trio world is going to exist. And it says, and yes, we'll allow this for solos too. So what you're going to be able to do if you're feeling crazy macho awesome is you can actually queue with 2 out of 3 and get into that game with only 2 out of 3 without getting filled. And you'll even be able to queue as 1 out of 3 and actually play full solo against squads of 3 if you're a total masochist maniac, like good as lemur type. So I thought this was like a pretty spicy, you know, kind of take an addition to adding another level of competitiveness to players that are wanting to like really test their limits, right? So finally wrapping it up here with kind of where we started, we plan to ship the trios merge on April 2nd, but we want to make sure we get all the tuning and feedback right before we do. So we're hosting 2 playtest days with an NA and EU window each, so you can give us all the feedback on balance tuning, game pacing, and more. And so these were the dates that happened. There's going to be new dates this coming week. Make sure to grab this playtest interested role if you want to get the ping for that. And then this is talking about if you get selected, but in this one, you didn't even need to get selected. Like I didn't even see it until a little bit later, and I didn't even apply to the email. And you can just, it's an open playtest. It's not like the previous internal ones where you have to get selected. And you can see if I click on this thread over here on the right, we can kind of see the install instructions. And you can just do this. Like basically you didn't even have to sign up. You could just do this, which is what I did, and get in. And so next week you don't have to worry about like, you know, emailing them or signing up or anything. All you got to do is basically follow these instructions. I'm assuming it's going to be basically the same, probably a different code next week. And you basically download the, you know, beta branch and can play the playtest, and then you uncheck it afterward and it'll, you know, kind of re-download the normal live version of the game. And there hasn't been real patch notes on this. There's definitely a lot of changes that are in there that aren't kind of documented yet. But the most important thing of this is filling out this playtest feedback form at the end. So, you know, once you do actually get in there, play for a couple hours, make sure to fill out this form, give them kind of as best detailed, like high resolution feedback you can so that they can continue tuning this thing and make it dope for when it hits on live. Boom. So that's it for this video. There's actually a lot more I think I could talk about based on kind of what I saw in the scrims yesterday and stuff, but I'm going to kind of leave it there, give you the opportunity to watch, you know, the VOD yourself, watch kind of what it looks like for the very first look at a high level competitive play, and then hopefully get you interested enough to playtest next week and give your feedback so we can basically have the best version of Trios possible when it does hit live on April 2nd. I know it is a big, scary change, guys. I was very caught off guard by it myself, but the more I kind of internalize it and the reasons behind it, the more it kind of makes sense. And I really think over the next couple months, it'll make even more sense as we see kind of potentially even bigger changes coming out of Theorycraft and SUPERVIVE. So with that, I just want to thank you so much for watching. Remember to take care of yourself and keep vibing. Catch you in the next one. Peace.